why was it so awful? Well, you know, I was a right-wing guy talking right-wing talk to a room full of people who, they weren't malicious. They were not professional anti-oil sands activists. It's not like I was in a room of Greenpeace professionals. In fact, they were very amateur, very ordinary people. If I was honest, I would say that actually the central characteristic of these people was not malice. It was do-goodery. I mean, they want to save the world. They were idealistic, maybe a little utopian, but actually wanted to heal things. They were not bad people. But the average person in that room that day was not like me and my buddies out west here. It was, you know, a 20-something university student from McGill, taking vegetarian studies, you know. The only thing she ever heard about the oil sands was from Clubs Week when Greenpeace had their booth, or from St. Suzuki on TV, so how would she know any better? I'd call the average person in that room Zoe. There's a picture of her right there. And by the way, Zoe can be a boy. There are boys, Zoe's right. But that was the average person that day. And I was talking at cross purposes. I was talking about my values instead of Zoe's values. So in a rare moment of self-reflection, I thought, can I make the liberal case, the Zoe case, the vegetarian case for the oil sands? Can I try and think with the other part of my brain? I mean, I like to say every fella in this room spends half our time thinking, what do women want? So if a guy can think, what do women want? Can a right-winger from Alberta think, well, what does Zoe, the liberal from Montreal, want? What does she care about? Well, let's ask her. I mean, I think the first thing Zoe would say she cares about, if you asked her, was environmental responsibility. There's St. Suzuki looking up into heaven. My fellow angels, I'll be with you soon. I'll be with you soon. Wait for me, I'm coming. So Zoe believes in environmental responsibility, which is clean air, clean water, clean soil. Those are traditional definitions. But she also believes she's worried about greenhouse gases, which is not a traditional form of pollution, but she's concerned about it. But that's not the whole bundle of values that motivates Zoe. I mean, look at the word Greenpeace. There's the green part, and then there's the peace part. I mean, Zoe cares about peace. If she was a little bit older, she would have been against the war in Iraq. If she was a little bit older still, she would have been a disarmament marcher in the 80s. You know, I mean, Zoe is I wouldn't call her a peacenik, but she values peace very much. The third thing Zoe would say, I mean, Zoe still lives at home with her folks and she works at Starbucks, but she still sees herself with the working men and women of the world. She sees herself as with the proletariat classes. And I mean, I'm joking around a bit, but actually a large part of the progressive criticism of the oil sands comes from labor unions. They're a big part of the political discussion in both Canada and the United States. They're a big part of the NDP. So treatment of workers and looking out for workers and being on the side of workers as opposed to the bosses is one of Zoe's values. I mean, I'm having some fun describing Zoe, but actually, I don't think these are characters. I'm not setting up straw men to knock down. Zoe really does care about the environment and peace and the treatment of workers. And this next one, human rights, I think it's so obvious that Zoe probably wouldn't say it unless you prompted her. It's like the wallpaper or the carpet. You don't even notice it. I mean, here in Canada, we treat people who are weaker than us, who are different than us, we treat them very well. We're very tolerant. I mean, we take it for granted. So if you remind Zoe about that basic value, she'll say, oh, yes, I'm very concerned about that too. So these are the four progressive values that Zoe holds to. And I wasn't speaking this language that day at the Ottawa Writers' Festival. Environmental responsibility, peace, the treatment of workers, and human rights. And if there's any Zoes in the room today, you're probably nodding along, you're saying, I don't like the way he's describing me, but yeah, that's me. Or maybe you'd put it in a different order or use slightly different language. Instead of treatment of workers, a real lefty would say economic justice, or something. Fine. But these are real values of the left. And so, how would I make the case for the oil sands, and in fact for Alberta, using Zoe's values? Well, the first thing I would do is I would say, Zoe, look, you have got to be morally serious. You've got to be grown up about this, Zoe. The alternative to the oil sands is not oil sands versus some fantasy fuel of the future that's perfect in every way, environmentally, socially, perfect in every way except for that it does not exist yet. That's not a real discussion. I mean, if we were at a Star Trek convention, you could tell me how awesome the lithium crystals would be, or what were they mining in that movie Avatar? They called it unobtainium, which is a pretty good name for it. Yeah, you know what? If you want to have a fantasy get-together where we're all dream together, yeah, awesome. Let's use the lithium crystals, or unicorn dust, or what's Greenpeace pitching now, recycled pee, whatever it is, knock yourself out. But for those of us who actually want to heal the world, Zoe, for those of us, I mean, isn't the test of morality how things actually work, real life decisions? You can be a saint in your own mind, but if you're not making the right decisions in real life, it's not helping. And look, I got to fill up my car with gas probably today, and I can't fill it up with the lithium crystals or cold fusion or whatever it is. So the choice is not between oil sands oil and some perfect fantasy fuels. Oil sands oil versus oil from other places in the world. I mean, if we were talking about olive oil, buy it from Greece or Spain or Italy or whoever you want, good guys, I don't care. If we were talking about chocolate, you would buy it from the chocolate-making superpowers of Luxembourg and Switzerland. Fine. But we are talking about crude oil. And if you're not going to buy it from the oil sands, well, Zoe, you owe it to yourself, if you're serious, to tell me where you're going to buy oil from. And the thing is, if you're not buying oil from us, you're buying it from somewhere else. And I don't know what God was thinking about when he was handing it out, because he gave crude oil to all the world's bastards. I mean, look at this list. This is the top 10 list of oil countries ranked by reserves. That skull and bones is the unofficial OPEC logo. I hear, my sources tell me, I'm a Jew, my Saudi sources, my Saudi sources tell me that when the cameras are gone, they all put on their pirate hats and say, Avast Allah. Of course, you'll see Russia is not a member of OPEC. They got Vladimir Putin, a former KGB agent, as their president. They don't need some little club. Hey, you kids go off and play in OPEC. Vladimir Putin's too tough for them. Anyways, you will see that we are the only Western liberal democracy on the list. I'm sorry, Switzerland ain't on the list. I'm sorry, Norway is not on the list. They're producing, but the production's going down 10% a year. I am sorry, but there are no good guys on this list other than us. And so if you say you are against oil sands oil, fine. But you have to tell me where you're going to get your oil from, Zoe. It's not enough to say you don't like this, but if you're going to fill up your car with gas, tell me where you want your gas filled up from. And not just you, but 34 million Canadians and 300 million Americans. And you know what? Telling me you're not going to drive anymore, first of all, I don't believe you. And second of all, it's not going to solve the problem. Because in 2009, we reached a tipping point where for the first time in history, more cars were bought and sold in China than in the United States. And good for them. They don't want to walk anymore. They don't want to bicycle anymore. Good for them. They're being lifted out of misery. They're being lifted out of poverty by oil. It's a blessing. So now maybe they can have an ambulance. So now maybe they can have comfort and the quality of life that we have. This is a good thing that China is industrializing. You know what? They all want to be two-car families one day. And same with India and Brazil and the rest of the developing world. This is good news. My point is that the demand for oil will only continue to grow even if Zoe takes the bus to Starbucks one day. I'm sorry, that will not make a dent in it. That will not make a dent. And so I put it to you that if we use Zoe's values, Zoe's liberal values, her McGill Greenpeace Club values, not my right-wing Halliburton, Dick Cheney, George Bush values. Zoe, if we use your values, your yardsticks, your measurements, and if we take those values and go around the world and compare oil sands oil to every other source of oil in the world, you must come to the conclusion I have. The Canadian oil sands oil is, in fact, the fair trade coffee of the world's oil industry. I believe that's a fact. Let's do it quickly. Here's St. Suzuki. Clean air, clean water, clean soil, greenhouse gases. Well, it is tough. Let me tell you, it was not easy being in that room. I mean, the photographer himself was there, actually, of these oil sands porn posters. I mean, it was a hostile crowd. And then there was me trying to defend this ugliness. I mean, try being an Alberta boy defending this filthy, stinking air. I mean, you can almost smell that just looking at it, right? I mean, you're out there, try defending the Athabasca River. That you could light that on fire, I bet. Try defending that out there in Ottawa. or the scarred land from seismic. Try defending that. And that's what I had to do. I'm just playing around with you. That's actually Russia. That's not, we don't allow that kind of flaring. We don't allow that in Alberta. It's actually against the law. And yeah, that's the Niger River Delta. The Athabasca water is pure. And no, that ain't seismic, actually. I'll tell you what that is a little bit later. It is true, though, the oil sands are ugly, at least when they're being produced in open pit mines. Any open pit mine of any sort around the world is not pretty. And it is true that this will, that is what it looks like, part of it. Looks like something out of the land of Mordor in Lord of the Rings. No wonder Greenpeace, this is another Greenpeace photo, no wonder they use this to raise money. This is an evocative, emotional picture. Now, they say, Greenpeace does, that the oil sands cover an area geographically as large as the United Kingdom or the state of Florida, and it is true. But it is not true that an entire area that large will be dug up in an open pit mine. And this is just another little embroidery, another little fib by the Antis, because actually only 2% of the land area is the oil sands close enough to the surface that you'll open pit mine it. You don't have an open pit mine when the good stuff is a kilometer down. For 98% of the land area of the oil sands, you'll get it through a process called in situ, or in place, or underground. This is an oil sands production facility in situ operating. There's a small pad where the plumbing is, but everything covered by forest there is oil sands in production. This is not a Greenpeace fundraising photo, because no one would get mad at that. Everywhere there's trees growing, birds chirping, critters frolicking. This is the face of 98% of the oil sands, which is exactly why Greenpeace doesn't mention it. And by the way, those 2% of the land area that will be mined, by law they must be reclaimed, and already 61 square kilometers has been reclaimed. Here's a before and after. This is the Mildred Lake oil sands mine, before and after reclamation. This is Bill's Lake. This is what you wouldn't even know a mine was. This is gorgeous wetlands. This is Gateway Hill. This is certified reclaimed. Was planted in the early 1980s. It's coming back already. That level of reclamation does not happen in open pit mines anywhere else in the world. That's a fact. Syncrude alone has planted 5.5 million trees. It's not in the Greenpeace news. Let's talk about water use. All 100 oil sands companies combined are allotted 2% of the river flow in Fort McMurray. Compare that to 60, 70, 80% of the water allotted from the Columbia or the Colorado rivers. It is a minuscule portion. Only 1% is used, and even that's reduced during periods of low flow. Let's talk about water for a second. It does take about 105 gallons of water to make a barrel of oil in an open pit mine. A little bit, actually a lot less for in situ. Let's compare that to other uses. Again, let's just put things in context. I wake up at the crack of 10 every day, like you, and I lurch into the kitchen, throw a hamburger on the grill, like you. I'm a normal guy. 634 gallons of water to make that hamburger from calf to plate. 634 gallons of water. That's how much water we use in everyday life. All right. I throw on a cotton shirt maybe when my wife starts yelling at me. That's another 713 gallons to get that cotton shirt from the field to the shirt. Put on a pair of jeans. 1,800 gallons of water to make that one pair of jeans. All right, it's dinner time. I'll have some more beef. 4,095 gallons of water. All I'm trying to do is put things into perspective for water use. We are a thirsty society. I should get a stat for how much water goes into making a cup of coffee. And it's not just the stuff you pour. It's getting the beans and producing the beans. SAGD, which is one of the underground procedures, doesn't use tailing ponds at all, doesn't use any fresh water at all. Tailings ponds are reclaimed as well, unlike, say, our friends in Florida. 500 square kilometers of phosphate tailings ponds down there. No plans for reclamation, of course. That's 3 times as big as Alberta's tailings ponds. I'm just trying to give you some perspective. I'm just trying to tell Zoe a few things to put things in perspective. Let's talk about greenhouse gases. When I was a kid way back in the 20th century, I first learned the words carbon dioxide when we were studying about photosynthesis. Now, back then, we called carbon dioxide plant food. But now we call it a pollutant. I admit I'm admitting carbon dioxide right now. I apologize. There are some people in the room emitting some methane. I won't point you out. These are naturally occurring gases, by the way. But this fella here shown giving a speech for $150,000 at an OPEC summit. It wasn't an OPEC summit, but it was in Saudi Arabia. He's convinced us that carbon dioxide is pollution and is endangering the world. Well, let me stop and give you one of my learnings from that debate at the Ottawa Writers' Festival. Do not try to deprogram a Gorebot. Do not try to pull them out of the cult. Do not try and tell them that their pagan, Gaian religion is wrong. I mean, would you try and convince someone that Christianity or Judaism or Sikhism is wrong in a 5-minute debate? You'll just offend them. Don't try and criticize someone's religion. And let's be honest, for many people, this eco-lifestyle is a form of religion, if not in a deeply theological way, at least in rituals and beliefs and customs, sorting all your garbage in 5 different piles. Look, don't try and get people out of that religion. They'll just hear blah, 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 for the rest. They'll just write you off. I was there, I've done it. Here's the good news. You do not have to be a denier, what an awful word, or even a skeptic, to win the debate. You can win it on Zoe's terms. The first thing is to tell Zoe the good news. The good news is that over the last 20 years, according to Environment Canada, the amount of carbon dioxide emitted per barrel of oil sands oil has fallen by 29%. We're 29% cleaner, greener, more efficient now than we were 20 years ago. I can hardly wait to see where those numbers are 5, 10, 20 years from now. Because we're constantly trying to improve. It's still an experimental process. We're trying to get it better. Do you think they sit around in the Kremlin? Do you think they sit around in those golden palaces in the desert in Saudi Arabia thinking, how can we get our carbon footprint down? No, but we are. Zoe, the good news is we're getting our numbers down. All 100 companies in the oil sands combined emit about 45 megatons of CO2 a year. Now, the word mega sounds pretty big. It's a little bit scary. But just for context, Zoe, there are individual coal-fired power plants in Asia with a 42 megaton footprint. Individual coal-fired power plants. Here's a picture of a new coal-fired power plant in Laseng, China. That is not photoshopped. They are building 2 to 3 new coal-fired power plants a week in China. And God bless them. Look, that's what Britain looked like through our industrial revolution. Why should we have our smoky industrial revolution and no one else is allowed to? And by the way, the factories powered by this smoky power, they fill up our Walmarts and our Toys R Us's. So don't think that we're not a part of this. My point is, look, this is what China looks like. You shut down all 100 oil sands companies. In 3 days, it's made up for from coal-fired power in China. That's not carbon dioxide in the air. That's particulate carbon. That's smog. This is the Taichung power plant, the single largest carbon emitter in the world. It's being expanded. God bless them. Give them power. Why should we be the only ones who have air conditioning in the summer and heat in the winter? Good for them. But I'm trying to tell you that a single coal power plant in Asia, they're building 2 to 3 a week in China alone, is more CO2 than the oil sands. By the way, underground accidental coal mine fire. Oops, boss, I set the coal mine on fire. That thing's going to burn for 100 years. Sorry. 360 megatons of CO2 a year. Now, I got nothing against coal. Believe me, I get it every year for Christmas in my stocking. I have come to see the positive side of coal. But if you're caring about CO2, well, look at this map. This is from CAP. Is this your map? This is a Natural Resources Canada map. Those little blue dots are the carbon footprint of oil sands. Those orange dots are coal fired power in Canada, and those red dots that look like bacteria multiplying in a petri dish, that's coal-fired power in the United States. Again, I'm not anti-coal. I'm just saying, folks, what's the problem on this map? If you think the dots are the problems are the red dots, not the little blue dot. I like quoting Barack Obama. I'm a very liberal man ever since I met Zoe. Barack Obama's Argonne National Laboratory is the U.S. administration's independent scientific lab, and they have something called the well-to-wheels analysis. The GREET analysis is actually what it's called. And it measures all carbon debits and credits from the moment you poke a hole in the ground to turn the key in your car. So that Saudi super tanker bringing the oil over, how much carbon does that emit? When you catch the natural gas and use it to co-generate power and displace higher carbon coal power, how much do we credit? It's the most comprehensive carbon dioxide analysis I've ever seen. So let's use a barrel of oil sands oil using cogeneration as your basic unit. It is a fact that oil from Saudi Arabia or your Muammar Gaddafi special has 6 to 10% less CO2 per barrel. It's a fact. There's no way around that fact. We have to sort of use that energy to boil the sand out of the oil. That's why it needs more energy. They don't in Saudi Arabia. But using the Obama administration's analysis, oil from Nigeria and Iraq has the same carbon footprint because they don't have any environmental controls. It's just flare. All that natural gas. Nigeria alone flares $2 billion worth of natural gas a year. Forget about the environment. They don't even capture the economic value there. And oil from Venezuela is even more carbon intensive. That's oil, by the way, that our lower carbon oil sands oil would have displaced if the Keystone XL pipeline went through. And what's the highest carbon oil in the world? Why, it's from California itself. It's called California heavy. It's so heavy. It's the most carbon intense oil in the world, which is why Arnold Schwarzenegger and Nancy Pelosi and all those eco-activists had to exempt it from their low-carbon fuel standards that they passed. They grandfathered their own high-carbon oil industry because really they didn't want to actually clean up the air. They wanted credit for being eco, and they wanted other people to shut down their carbon. When James Cameron jetted up here from the smoggiest city in North America, Los Angeles, to lecture us on our oil sites, he forgot to mention that he's burning either Saudi oil or California heavy. He forgot to mention that. Look, Zoe, take your hands out of your ears just for a second. So look, I'm not saying we're going to save the world overnight. I don't think that's possible, but baby steps, Zoe, baby steps. Isn't it a better idea to move off the high carbon California and Venezuela oil and onto the lower carbon oil sands oil? Zoe, shouldn't we at least do something? All right. Look, I'm not going to win the argument on the environment, but maybe I can cool that hot rage that Suzuki has planted in the minds of Zoes around the world and call that a stalemate, fight that to a draw. And maybe let's try and win the debate, though, on the other liberal values, like peace. As you know, Canada invented peacekeeping. That's pretty cool for a country to invent. We won the Nobel Prize for that. Our country did. So we invented peacekeeping. And Saudi Arabia, well, they invented 9/11. Yeah. 15 out of the 19 terrorists that day were from Saudi Arabia. They, to this day, are the world's largest financiers of terrorism. That's what they do with their oil money. Iran, as you know, is building a nuclear bomb and the missiles to deliver it. Russia has rebuilt their armed forces with their oil money, rebuilt their KGB. It's now called the FSB. This is a picture of Russia invading the formerly independent country of Georgia. And no, that picture I showed you before, that was not seismic in Alberta. It's not seismic. That's not what seismic looks like. That's a village in Darfur, in Sudan, that was scorched and torched. It's not seismic. That's 300,000 people murdered in a genocide, according to a United Nations estimate. 300,000 people killed. Take 300,000 people killed times 185 ounces of blood in the average human body, divided into the number of barrels of oil exported by Sudan over the same period of time. Well, that works out to 6.5 milliliters of blood in every damn barrel sold by Sudan. 6.5 milliliters. A lipstick tube is 4.5 milliliters. So that's a tube and a half of blood in every barrel. Now, listen, it's true, we got some blood in our oil sands oil, I won't lie to you. 1,600 ducks a few years ago sat down by accident in a tailings pond at Syncrude when their electric scarecrow wasn't working that well. This is one of those actual ducks about to die. Now, Greenpeace and others call that a tragedy. That's the word they use. I will not call it a tragedy, though. I will call it an industrial accident. I'll call it a PR disaster. They were prosecuted in criminal court and fined $3 million. That's $2,000 a duck. I will call that a prosecutorial bizarre expression of priority. You got all the crime nipped in Edmonton, do ya? You got all that crime in hand. Homicide capital of Canada. You're going to go after a duck killer, eh? Okay. Got it. I will call it wings night at my local pub. I have been known to eat 50 wings in a sitting. I think you can believe me. But I actually won't call that a tragedy. You see, if I call that a tragedy and that a tragedy, then the word doesn't really mean anything, because that and that, these both cannot be the same moral gravity. 300,000 people, human beings, killed on purpose, and 1,600 ducks dying by accident, those cannot be the same thing. Those cannot be the same thing. This is an accident. This is something that companies spend millions of dollars to avoid. But it is just an accident. It is not a moral failure. This is a moral failure. This is mass murder. This is a war crime. They cannot be the same thing. Too bad those stupid Darfuris didn't have the common sense to be ducks. Maybe Greenpeace would have given a damn then. Oh, by the way, wind turbines kill 445 times more birds per unit of energy than the oil sands. Hey, that's just if you care. Zoe, you're the one who cares. I'm just a right-winger. You're the one who cares, Zoe. Treatment of workers. This is the Burj Khalifa. It's the tallest building in the world. Burj is Arabic for tower, and Khalifa is the name of the dictator of the UAE. So of course he's going to name it after himself. He's not going to let Donald Trump grab that phallic symbol for himself. I mean, you're a dictator. You're going to name the biggest penis in your country after yourself. There's lots of big penile structures in the UAE, in Dubai. I mean, seriously, it's got the tallest towers in the world. And that is not Photoshop. It glistens. I mean, it is beautiful there. If you like shiny pillars, alabaster, beautiful, you would have loved Atlanta, Georgia in the 1850s. Those cotton plantations, beautiful. Just don't look at all the brown people who keep it that way, okay? Because you see, for every Emirati, that's what they call their citizens, there are 4 or 5 foreign indentured workers, usually fellow Muslims, Palestinians, Bangladeshis, Indians, Thais, Filipinos, who work in just one notch above slave labor. I mean, they do get paid. They live in squalor. Here's 6 men in a little hut. The passports are usually seized when they arrive. Maybe they get paid, maybe they don't. Labor unions are against the law. They can be fired with or without any cause. That's life. Just don't look at them. There's 4 of them for every Emirati. They're the ones building the place. They're the reason why oil, the marginal barrel of oil in the Gulf, is $5 a barrel. When you don't have to pay pennies, of course you're not going to have costly oil. Oh, by the way, it's not just men, it's women. And you think they're only economically abused? Don't kid yourself. You know, this one was lucky to be paid. Here's a news story. I followed the Saudi news. Maid locked up without pay for 17 years in Saudi Arabia. That's not rare. Saudi Arabia is one of the world's largest executioners. They execute capital punishment. They execute hundreds of people a year. The majority of them are these foreign workers. The majority of them. What are these crimes? Well, right now the Saudi Mutawin, that's the religious police, are having a war on witches. Saudi Arabia morality police declare war on witches. Guys, there are no witches. It's sort of, we went through that ourselves 400 years ago. There are no witches. But if you're a Filipino nanny who has a cross, maybe you're a witch. If you're a Shiite Muslim instead of a Sunni Muslim, maybe you're a witch. And what's the punishment? Well, it's often stoning in that country. Nigeria, how do they treat workers? Well, this guy did fine. He was the former dictator there. He pocketed $5 billion. According to the Nigerian government's own Commission on Corruption, Nigerian politicians, dictators, bureaucrats, policemen, inspectors stole $366 billion from the national purse over the last 50 years. $366 billion. That is why Nigeria, which should be one of the world's richest countries, is one of the poorest. Life expectancy, 47. 1 out of every 2 people living on less than $1 a day. Because the guys at the top are stealing it all. And it's not just the tippy top. Oh, not everyone's getting $5 billion. But every inspector and bureaucrat is on the take. That's why there's 2,000 unremediated toxic oil spills that'll never be cleaned up. You just pay them $100. How do we treat workers here in Canada? Well, this is the new McDonald Island Park in Fort McMurray. I mean, I don't need to show you guys how gorgeous it is up there. It's the highest income city in Canada. That's how we treat our workers. $150,000 a year for a welder. Why the hell did I go to law school? I mean, it's the most generous city in Canada too, by the way, according to the United Way. And not just for guys who are skilled. Let's talk about the lowest quartile of income earners, like the clerk, the guy at Subway sandwiches, the lowest quarter. You're working poor, get yourself to Fort McMurray. Get to Fort McMurray. You will not be poor anymore. Because even though your cost of living is higher, your apartment's higher, your food's higher, your earning is so much higher, yet your purchasing power for the working poor in Fort McMurray is 77% higher than in other cities in Canada. You go to Fort McMurray, you will not be poor. That's how we treat people on the bottom rungs, let alone the top rungs. All right, let's talk about human rights. We're in the middle of an election. In 10 days, we're going to have another woman premier. I don't know if it's going to be Danielle Smith or Alison Redford. One of them's going to win. That's not new for Alberta. We're a province where the famous 5 suffragettes made a fuss. The Persons case. Nellie McClung from Alberta, the first woman magistrate in the entire British Empire. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Beverly McLaughlin, in Albertan. The last 2 governors general in a row of Canada were women, actually immigrant women. I mean, there is no height in this country that you cannot climb to, no matter what your race or sex is. I mean, yeah, there's pockets of racism, people are people, but nothing can stop you from going to the top. This is Melissa Blake, re-elected as the mayor of Fort McMurray. Completely unremarkable to have a young woman mayor of Fort McMurray. I mean, duh, yeah, of course. What's the big deal? Well, I got a question for you. How many young women mayors are there in Saudi Arabia? Well, there are none, of course. I mean, it's against the law to be a young woman mayor in Saudi Arabia. Well, what are you, some witch? What are you, some witch? Only a witch would ask that, you witch. You witch. Well, you won't go on a date with me, you witch. It's against the law to drive if you're a woman in Saudi Arabia. Against the law to get elective surgery without the permission of your husband/owner, in Saudi Arabia. It's against the law to be raped in Saudi Arabia. I said to be raped, I didn't say to rape, because to be raped is the crime of adultery under Sharia law, which is the law of Saudi Arabia. And of course the punishment for these things, as it is in the Islamic Republic of Iran, is stoning to death. This is a picture about 30 years ago. This is an Amnesty International picture from Iran of a woman being buried up to her arms. The stones will come next and she will die. This happens in the 20th century. This is not some figment or fiction from the medieval times. This is how women are treated in Saudi Arabia. Now, I got to tell you, Zoe, all the gas burns the same in your gas tank. So when you're filling up your Prius or your VW bus, you can burn that Saudi oil. I don't care. I mean, come on, Zoe, it all burns the same. You're the one who cares about women and minorities. At least I thought you did. How about gays? According to the U.S. State Department, between 4,000 and 6,000 gay men and lesbians have been executed in Iran since the revolution for the crime of being gay. For the crime of being gay. This is an actual picture, 2007. These guys are about to be hanged. In the United Arab Emirates, they're very, very liberal over there. When they catch gays, they just put them in prison and pump them full of drugs to de-gay them. It's funny. It sounds funny. That's Dubai. That's United Arab Emirates. Look, it all burns the same in your tank, Zoe. I mean, you buy it from Iran, you buy it from Saudi Arabia, Sudan, whatever, right? I mean, hey, just see no evil, hear no evil, right? I mean, whatever. David Suzuki doesn't talk about it, so it doesn't exist. Aboriginal people. The oil sands are the #1 employer of Aboriginal people in Canada, full stop. Those are 6-figure jobs, many of them. Those aren't fake work, make work jobs. Those are real jobs. They need the labor. They need the manpower. I was just looking at Syncrude stats the other day. Aboriginal population in Canada, about 3.8%. Syncrude, it's 9%. They're hiring Aboriginals at triple the rate of the general population. And it's not just the direct hires, the 1,800 direct employers. The Aboriginal guys saying, why should I drive a truck for the boss? Why don't I buy a truck and be my own boss and pretty soon hire some guys? And you know what? There's billions of dollars in contracts going to Aboriginal-owned firms. The Fort Mackay Band, they got it worked out. 0% unemployment. Why would you sit around? Why don't you go be a millionaire? There are countless Aboriginal millionaires in the oil patch, and I predict to you that within the next 10 years, there will be Canada's first Aboriginal billionaire. An Aboriginal billionaire. Those two words do not belong together. I bet you this is the first time in your life you've heard those two words put together. You know why? Because in the past, the answer was, be reliant on government. No. How about make a go of it in Canada's booming economy in an industry that is so Aboriginal friendly? You get a truck and a guy, you're in business. You're a millionaire. And it's not just Aboriginals who are lifted off of wealth. How about our friends from Newfoundland and all the Atlantic? Newfoundland is a have province in large part. Former Liberal Senator Bill Romkey said that 50% of the income in parts of his province come from the oil sands. 50%! It's lifting the whole country up. In Ontario, there are more Ontarians working for the oil sands, either on Bay Street in finance or in heavy equipment manufacturing. More Ontarians in Ontario working for the oil sands than work for the big three automakers. That is a fact. Listen, if you believe in environmental responsibility, in peace, in the treatment of workers and human rights, then you must come to the conclusion that I have. That the oil sands aren't just a great way to make money, and a great way to develop our economy, and a great way to lift our country up. They're not just a right-wing great thing. They're the best moral thing we can do for the world, not just for ourselves, but knowing that every barrel of oil we sell displaces one barrel of conflict oil. That's $100 a barrel less that the bad guys are getting. It's not just that it's coming to us. It's who that $100 is not going to. These four values, I've been joking around about Zoe having fun, but they're actually Canadian values, you know? This is part of what Canada is. We are peaceful. We do believe in treating people right, whatever the background is. We do believe in keeping the country beautiful. We're in the middle of Kananaskis. How could we think anything but? But you know, these four Canadian values, they're beautiful. But there's one more Canadian value. He doesn't have it. This is Donald Trump, perhaps the world's most audacious man. Very un-Canadian. Not anti-Canadian, but un-Canadian. He's got so much chutzpah, so much braggadocio, so much... He's so noisy. I don't think he could last more than a week in our country. We are not like him. We're like the two chipmunks. After you. No, after you. No, after you. No, please after you. No, please after you. No. And the thing is, being modest and humble and deferential is a wonderful quality in a human being. And one day I'll know what that feels like. But for a country whose competitors are the world's butchers and dictators and tyrants and terrorists and union bashers and gay hangers and women stoners, it does not do us well to be meek and modest in their face. It does not do us to, after you, sir, King of Saudi Arabia, after you, Hugo Chavez, yes, please, you go ahead first. No. I love being Canadian, and you know what, I'm not going to be quiet about it. I want to be proud about it. I want to be oil sands proud, because they're not just the job sands and the freedom sands. They're the gay rights sands and the feminist sands and the liberal sands and the union sands and every single thing that is non-existent in those other countries in the world. And you know what it starts with? It starts with people in Alberta, individuals stopping to allow Greenpeace to hand you the script to read. I am evil. I am a climate criminal. I am a... No. You put that aside and you speak honestly. If you are living your life and conducting your business in a way that is unethical, well, either reform yourself or quit your job. But if, as I am quite sure is the truth, you are conducting yourselves as your friends and colleagues in a manner that you are proud of, in a manner that conforms with our Canadian values, and you're open to criticism, in fact, you're probably your own worst critic. You know, in Canada, we love criticism so much. Russia, they've assassinated 20 journalists. That's how they handle criticism. Saudi Arabia, don't even try it. Hey, break into an oil sands refinery for Greenpeace. We'll put you on TV and let you go with a slap on the wrist. They broke out of the Calgary Tower a couple years ago. The police held back traffic to keep the Greenpeace people safe. Hey, try that in Saudi Arabia. Try that in post-9/11 United States. We love criticism so much in Canada, we give the country's biggest complainer a 6-figure job, a free house, and call him leader of the opposition. Don't, you know... So don't stop. Don't stop being self-critical, and never be deaf to calls to improve your environmental practices, your Aboriginal relations. Yes. But being open to criticism is different than being a fool for Greenpeace or for Saudi Arabia. And I think the number one tool for pushing back is to know yourself and to know that you are ethical and your friends and neighbors and families are, and drive the choice. Oil sands oil is not a devilish product that we must be embarrassed of. It is a premium product. It is a premium product like fair trade coffee. And I want to leave you with a couple of fun examples that I've been cooking up in my mind. Imagine you're driving down the highway. Somewhere in Toronto. God help me for living there. And you see, make a statement, ethical gas made from ethical oil. Pull over at exit 18. Gas, the good kind. What's that all about? Does it cost? It costs the same. What's that? I'm pulling in. We serve ethical. Fill up. What's that? point of sale. You made the ethical choice. Now ask a friend to do the same. It's even on the bottom of your receipt. Wouldn't that be neat if, like the fair trade coffee people, like the organic people, like the no dolphins were hurt in making this can of tuna people, instead of being shy and embarrassed, we say, you know what? We're spending $80 a barrel making oil. Why are we spending that much? I'll tell you why. Because we pay people 150 grand a year, not, 130 bucks a month or whatever that woman made. Because we have the strictest environmental standards in the world, because we allow labor unions, because we have a fair court system, because we have a regulatory process, because we pay taxes that go to school. That $80, yeah, it's a cost. Well, why don't you unlock the boastful value there? That is ethical oil. And I put it to you that a severely normal person, not a political hack, a severely normal person pulling up to a gas pump in their minivan, sees two gas pumps. One says made in Saudi Arabia, one says made in Nigeria, and I guess there's a third says made in Canada. Which do you think she's going to choose? She'll choose the Canadian ethical oil every single time. And my friends, you are representing the lucky, lucky province to be the only good guy in that list of 10 top reserve countries. We are the lucky ones. But it's not just luck, it's responsibility. It's not just our entitlement to the riches, it's our duty to develop them, knowing that to do so makes the world a better place. Thanks for having me here today.